The deep roar of motorcycle engines had only just subsided when the weathered wooden doors of Miller's Roadhouse pushed open. Within, the atmosphere carried scents of worn leather, motor oil, and decades of whiskey that had been spilled. Golden afternoon light streamed through grimy windows, cutting through the smoky air and reflecting off the chrome of roughly a dozen motorcycles parked out front. The riders, rough-looking men who appeared to fear no one, remained quiet for a beat, their jovial mood interrupted by the sound of tiny, rushed footsteps. A young girl, barely 6 years old, stood motionless in the doorway. Her pink backpack drooped awkwardly across both her small shoulders, and her cheeks were marked with grime and the tracks of tears. Terror was written across her face. Then she spoke in barely more than a breath. "Please, someone help me. If you believe in compassion, redemption, and the strength of human decency, even within the most hardened souls, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Untold Stories 0.4, because often the toughest-looking individuals are those with the most generous hearts." The entire space became motionless. The head of the regional motorcycle club, a man called Race Holloway, stood slowly from where he sat. His crimson leather jacket groaned as he shifted, his heavy boots resounding against the plank flooring. He had witnessed countless things during his 48 years riding the highways: brawls, blazes, and bereavement, but never a small child standing before his gang, shaking like a frightened animal. "What's the matter, sweetheart?" he questioned kindly, his gravelly tone gentler than anyone would have anticipated. She merely shook her head in response, gripping her backpack more firmly. From behind her, beyond the open doorway, drifted the muted sound of a man calling out her name. The voice held rage and intoxication in equal parts. Acting on instinct, Race signaled to one of his companions to shut the door. The biker called Colt complied, securing it solidly. The girl flinched at the noise, but then released a trembling breath, as though understanding she was protected for the first time in many hours. She revealed her name was Maddie, and her voice cracked when she attempted to continue speaking. "My dad's coming," she murmured. "He's angry with me. He hurts Mommy. He said he'll hurt me next." The bikers looked at one another. Hardened men, faces lined from years of pavement and weather, suddenly appeared unsure, even frightened. Race's chest constricted. He'd been that child before, the one who concealed himself behind doors, hoping for the yelling to end. He lowered himself before her, bringing his gaze level with hers. "You're protected here, Maddie," he assured her. "No one is going to harm you anymore." Hours earlier, this establishment had been merely a rest stop for exhausted wanderers and men escaping their personal troubles. Now it had transformed into something different, a haven. The men assembled around her quietly while Maddie perched on one of the bar stools, swaying her legs anxiously. Her pink backpack rested next to her on the bar top. Nobody ventured to handle it, though interest tugged at them all. What might a little child like her be transporting that drove her to flee all the way to this place? Beyond the walls, a police vehicle's siren rang faintly from far away. Race's pulse quickened. He looked toward Colt. "Check outside," he directed. Colt gave a nod and exited through the rear entrance. Maddie observed every action, her eyes brimming with both terror and weariness. She hadn't had anything to eat. Race requested one of the bar employees to fetch her a sandwich and some milk. When the food appeared before her, she paused, then murmured, "Mommy always said, don't eat from strangers." Race smiled slightly. "Your mom sounds smart," he replied quietly. "But we're not strangers anymore." Maddie took a small bite, then another. She was famished. While she consumed her meal, the men gradually started to observe subtle signs: marks on her wrist, soil on her footwear, and a scratch along her cheek. It caused even the most hardened among them to look away. When Colt came back, he appeared strained. "There's a truck stopped on the other side of the street," he reported. "Man pacing, drunk, yelling her name." Maddie's complexion drained of color. "That's him," she breathed. "Please don't let him take me." Race tightened his jaw. Years before, he vowed to himself he would never become entangled in another person's problems again. But observing Maddie, shaking and holding the pink backpack, he understood he had no alternative. He extended his hand toward the backpack carefully. "Maddie, what's in here?" he inquired. She wavered, then gave him permission to look inside. Within were several broken crayons, a wrinkled photograph, and a small worn teddy bear. But underneath those items was something additional, a folded envelope bearing unsteady handwriting that stated, "If something happens to me, please take care of Maddie." It bore her mother's signature. Race's throat constricted as he opened the letter. It was an appeal, a mother's frantic plea for someone, anyone, to shield her daughter from a man who had grown violent. The words were shaky, but unmistakable. "He won't stop. He drinks. He breaks things. And he says I make him angry just by breathing. If you find this, please keep her safe." The space became utterly quiet. Even the atmosphere seemed to pause. Maddie remained motionless, gaze lowered, gripping the hem of her sleeve. "Heard Mommy last night," she finally whispered. "She told me to run." For an instant, nobody stirred. Then Race addressed his men. "No one's taking this kid anywhere," he declared firmly. "Not while I'm breathing." His brothers agreed without a second thought. Moments afterward, the noise of the truck's door banging shut outside caused them all to pivot. The man, disheveled, enraged, and intoxicated, charged toward the entrance, bellowing Maddie's name. Race stepped out to confront him, his boots striking heavily against the wooden porch. "You looking for someone?" he questioned evenly. The man's fury wavered when he noticed the barrier of bikers standing behind Race. "That's my daughter," he snarled. "You got no right." Race's tone was measured, but it held an authority that made the atmosphere feel oppressive. "You lost that right the moment you laid a hand on her or her mama." What transpired next wasn't a physical confrontation. It was a moment of judgment. The man retreated awkwardly, comprehending he wasn't going to prevail in this situation. The police, summoned by one of the bikers, showed up shortly thereafter. Maddie's father was escorted away, screaming and swearing. When everything calmed down, Maddie was still perched at the bar clutching her teddy bear. Race sat beside her once more. "You're safe now," he said gently. "Your mama's letter made sure of that." She gazed up at him, tears glistening in her eyes. "Can I stay here?" she wondered. He smiled faintly. "For now, yeah, we'll make sure you're okay." That night, as the sun descended below the distant highway, the men congregated around Maddie. They'd witnessed suffering before, but something about her purity affected them in ways they hadn't anticipated. One of the bikers, a silent giant named Rick, attached a small patch to her backpack that displayed "Guardian Crew." Maddie smiled for the first time that entire day. Several weeks afterward, once her mother was discovered unharmed in a women's shelter, Maddie and her mom returned to express gratitude to the bikers. The pink backpack, previously a symbol of terror, now held fresh significance. It embodied protection, optimism, and the generosity of strangers who transformed into defenders. If this story moved your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Untold Stories 0.4, because narratives like these show us that empathy still thrives even in the most unexpected circumstances. Before you leave, tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in that bar when Maddie walked in? That day, beneath the thunderous sound of motorcycles and the dimming light of evening, a collection of men who previously thought they were too damaged to accomplish good discovered salvation in a small girl with a pink backpack. And for the first time in many years, Race gazed at the horizon and smiled, because sometimes rescuing someone else is the way you rescue yourself.